I saw you take the money.
You shouldn't have done that!
Don't touch me! Help!
Sit your old self down and shut your mouth before I lock you up in the basement where nobody can hear you cry. Officer Robert Davis barked. He stood in the middle of the crowded courtroom in downtown Atlanta, Georgia. He was a large man with a thick neck and a heavy black belt that rattled with metal tools every time he moved. He was looking down at a woman named Patricia Moore. Patricia was 62 years old. She was standing near the front wooden railing. She wore a pair of dark blue canvas shoes. The left shoe had a deep crack running across the bottom of the sole. The laces were not regular laces anymore. They had broken 3 years ago, so they were tied together in 4 different places with small, tight knots. The blue color of the fabric had faded into a dull gray from years of walking through rain and hot sun to get to her job at the laundromat. Patricia held her small brown purse with both hands. Her fingers were stiff. Her knuckles were pressed white against the cheap leather. She did not shake. She stood perfectly still. Officer Robert Davis looked around the room to make sure the crowded rows of people were watching him. He liked when people watched him work. He smiled a small, mean smile and pointed a thick finger right at the faded collar of Patricia's old dress. "Look at you," Robert said, his voice echoing off the high plaster ceiling. "You do not have a single dollar to your name. You come into this court looking like a pile of dirty clothes. You think you can talk back to a judge in my town? You belong in the back of a police van, not standing here wasting our time." The courtroom was packed with 42 people sitting on the hard oak benches. Right next to the judge's empty desk sat Sandra Mitchell, the court clerk. Sandra did not look up from her computer screen, but she reached out her hand and pushed a button to turn on the heavy iron gate lock. She was making it easier for Robert to trap people. On the other side of the room stood another officer named Lawrence Brooks. Lawrence looked down at his own black boots. He did not say a word. He knew Robert was crossing the line, but he did not want to lose his job. He felt a small weight press into his chest, but he kept his mouth shut. The room grew so quiet you could hear the steady tick of the black clock on the wall. It was exactly 9:14 in the morning. Nobody moved. Nobody helped. Robert took one step closer to Patricia. His heavy hand came up fast. It made a loud, sharp sound as it struck the side of her face. The force of the blow made her glasses fly off her nose. They hit the linoleum floor and cracked into 3 pieces. None of them could have known that the quiet young man standing by the back door would be the one to strip every piece of power from this room before the clock struck 10. Have you ever walked into a place and felt like someone had already decided you did not belong there? Drop a comment and tell me where you are listening from right now. Subscribe to Crown Stories. Patricia did not scream. She did not drop her head. She slowly wiped a small drop of red from her lip with the back of her wrinkled hand. In her mind, she was not in this loud, mean courtroom anymore. She was back in a tiny kitchen in the year 1994. She could hear the soft, steady voice of her own grandmother, Martha Moore. Martha used to sit by the window and sew old coats together. Martha always told her that a person's worth does not come from the price of their clothes. It comes from the truth they carry inside their bones. Patricia held onto that memory like a thick wooden shield. She looked straight into Robert's small eyes. Her voice was quiet, but it did not shake. "You can break my glasses," she whispered, "but you cannot break my spirit." This quiet answer made Robert's face turn a deep, angry red. He could not control her calm. He turned to the crowd and shouted, "Get this trash out of my sight right now!" He grabbed Patricia by her frail arm to drag her toward the side door. 2 more people in the front row stood up to look, but Robert pointed at them until they sat back down. Just then, a tall young man stepped out from the deep shadows by the exit doors. He wore a sharp, dark gray suit that was perfectly pressed. His tie was dark blue, the exact color Patricia's shoes used to be before the years washed them out. He walked down the center aisle with long, slow steps. His shoes did not make a single sound on the floor. He did not look at the crowd. He looked only at Patricia. He walked right past the heavy wooden gate that Sandra Mitchell had locked. He did not ask for permission. He reached out his hand, picked up the 3 broken pieces of Patricia's glasses, and placed them gently into his pocket. Then, he looked up at the empty judge's bench. He walked up the 3 carpeted steps and sat down in the tall leather chair. The whole room froze. Officer Robert Davis stopped dragging Patricia. His hand dropped from her arm. He stared at the young man sitting in the highest seat in the room. "Who do you think you are?" Robert yelled, taking 2 steps toward the bench. "Get down from there before I put you in handcuffs. That seat belongs to Judge Arthur Vance." The young man did not move a single muscle in his face. He opened a thick black leather folder he had brought with him. He laid it flat on the desk. He reached into his coat and took out a bright silver badge and a set of official papers stamped with the gold seal of the state of Georgia. He placed them right under the desk lamp. His name was Marcus Williams. He was 34 years old, and he was the newly appointed Chief Judicial Overseer for the state. He looked down at Robert. "My name is Judge Marcus Williams," he said. His voice was cold and heavy. "And this court is now under federal review." To understand how a young man could walk into a hostile room and take total control, we have to go back 25 years. We have to look at the numbers that built this moment. In the winter of 2001, Patricia Moore was working 2 different jobs in the city of Atlanta. She started her first job at a commercial laundry house at 4:30 in the morning. She washed heavy hotel sheets for 6 hours. Her hands were always wet. The hot steam from the giant machines made her skin red and raw. For this work, she was paid exactly $6.25 an hour. At 11 o'clock in the morning, she would walk 3 miles down Peachtree Street to a small grocery store. She spent the next 7 hours lifting heavy boxes of apples and cans of soup onto the shelves. She did not own a car. She could not afford the $4 a day for the city bus because every single penny she made had a specific purpose. Every Friday night, Patricia would sit at her small kitchen table under a single light bulb. She had a small green tin box with a silver lock. Inside that box, she kept white paper envelopes. One envelope had the word rent written on it in neat, round letters. Every week, she put exactly $120 into that envelope. Another envelope had the word food written on it. She put $40 into that one. But the largest envelope, the one that she handled with the most care, had the name Marcus written across the front. Every single week, no matter how cold the winter was, no matter how much her feet ached inside her cheap shoes, she dropped $50 into that envelope. That was the college fund. It was the price of her son's future. Marcus grew up watching those raw, red hands. He was 9 years old when he realized why his mother never bought herself a new coat. He found her old winter coat in the back of the closet. The wool was so thin you could see through it if you held it up to the light. The zipper had lost 3 teeth at the bottom, so she had to use a safety pin to keep it closed. Marcus had asked her why she did not buy a new one from the store down the street. Patricia had smiled, pulled him close to her side, and whispered a sentence he would remember every day for the rest of his life. She said, "A cold body can always find a blanket, Marcus, but a cold mind will never find a future." Do you think a child ever forgets the sacrifices their parents make for them? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. While Patricia was saving $50 a week, Officer Robert Davis was building a very different kind of life. Robert had joined the local police force in the year 1998. Within his first 2 years, he learned that the small municipal court was a gold mine for people with power. The court handled minor traffic tickets, small fines, and simple city violations. Most of the people who came through the door were poor. They did not have lawyers. They did not know the laws. Robert discovered that if he wrote extra violations on a ticket, the fines would double. A $60 ticket for a broken taillight would suddenly become a $300 charge for resisting an officer or causing a public disturbance. The city court system protected Robert because the city kept 40% of every dollar collected from those fines. In the year 2012 alone, Robert personally wrote 1,422 tickets. That was more than any other officer in the entire state of Georgia. The fines from those tickets brought in over $280,000 to the local court fund. Judge Arthur Vance, the older man who usually sat in the big chair, loved Robert for this. The more money the court made, the higher the judge's budget became. They were working together like a business. It was a machine that chewed up poor people and turned their pain into clean green cash. But Robert did not stop at writing tickets. He liked the feeling of watching people realize they were completely trapped. 5 years before this morning, in 2021, Robert stopped a young man named James Carter on a side street. James was 22 years old. He was driving home from his shift at a fast food restaurant at 2:15 in the morning. Robert told James that his license plate was dirty. When James politely asked if he could get out of the car to wipe it clean, Robert dragged him out of the seat and pushed his face into the wet asphalt. Robert wrote a report saying James tried to strike him. James spent 3 months in the county jail because he could not afford the $5,000 bail. He lost his job. He lost his small apartment. The system worked exactly the way Robert wanted it to. No one checked the records. No one asked questions. But Robert did not know that Marcus Williams was growing up. Marcus had used every single dollar from that small green tin box to pay for his books at Georgia State University. He spent his nights sitting in the corner of the law library until the cleaners turned off the lights at midnight. He graduated at the top of his class. He did not join a big corporate law firm where he could make $300,000 a year. Instead, he went to work for the federal government's Judicial Oversight Division. He spent 3 long years looking at numbers on computer screens. He looked at court dockets. He tracked fine collection rates. He noticed a strange pattern in this specific municipal court in Atlanta. The numbers were too high. The fines were too consistent. It looked less like a place of justice and more like a trap. 3 weeks before this morning, Marcus had officially been named Chief Judicial Overseer. He was given full power by the state Supreme Court to investigate any courtroom that showed signs of systemic abuse. He did not send a letter to Judge Arthur Vance to tell him he was coming. He did not call the police department. He wanted to see the machine work with his own eyes. He told his mother to come to the court on Monday morning to contest an old, unfair $30 parking ticket she had received while visiting a friend. He wanted to see how they treated an elderly woman when they thought nobody important was watching. Now, Marcus was sitting in the big leather chair. The silence in the room was so thick it felt like it was pressing against the walls. Sandra Mitchell, the clerk, finally looked up from her screen. Her fingers froze over the keyboard. She looked at Marcus, then she looked down at the official papers on the desk. She saw the heavy gold seal. Her face lost all its color. She knew what that seal meant. It meant the state government could close this entire building down with one stroke of a pen. "Officer Davis," Marcus said, his voice dropping into the quiet room like a heavy stone. "Step away from the wall. Walk over here and stand directly in front of this bench." Robert did not move right away. His chest puffed out under his blue shirt. He looked at Lawrence Brooks, the other officer, hoping Lawrence would step up to help him. But Lawrence remained perfectly still by the back wall. Lawrence had a wife and 3 small children at home. He had a home loan that cost him $1,200 a month. He had stayed silent for 5 years because he was terrified of losing his salary. But looking at the sharp, cold eyes of the young judge in the chair, Lawrence realized that staying silent today was going to cost him much more than money. He stood fast. He did not move an inch to help his partner. Robert finally walked over to the bench. He tried to make his voice sound loud and confident, the way he always did when he was talking to people on the benches. "Look, Judge Williams," Robert said, leaning his hands on the wooden rail. "You do not know how things work down here. This woman was being loud. She was refusing to follow my orders. I was just keeping the peace in Judge Vance's court. We have a system here that keeps this city safe." Marcus reached into his pocket. He took out the 3 broken pieces of his mother's glasses. He laid them side by side on the polished wood of the desk right next to the silver badge. "Is this part of your system, Officer Davis?" Marcus asked. He did not raise his voice. He did not have to. "Does your system require you to strike a 62-year-old woman because she spoke the truth?" "She was resisting," Robert said, his voice getting a little higher. He looked around the room, but the crowd was not smiling anymore. The 42 people on the benches were leaning forward. They were watching a man with a badge lose his ground for the very first time. Marcus turned his head slightly toward Sandra Mitchell. "Clerk Mitchell," he said, "turn on the main wall monitor. I want you to log into the court's secure server and pull up the video archive for this morning. Let us see exactly what the security cameras recorded at 9:14 a.m. Sandra's hands began to shake. She knew what was on that server. She had been the one who helped Robert delete video logs in the past. But she also knew that deleting a file under a federal review was a crime that carried a 10-year sentence in a federal prison. She looked at Robert, then she looked at Marcus. Fear made her choice for her. She hit 4 keys on her board. The giant television screen on the side wall flared to life. The video was clear. It showed the whole room from a high corner angle. The clock on the screen read 9:14:02. The entire room watched as Robert walked up to Patricia Moore. They saw him point his finger. They heard his cruel words about her old dress and her lack of money echo through the television speakers. Then they saw his hand come up. They saw the hard strike. They saw the old woman's head snap back, and they saw her glasses fly across
You
the floor.
shouldn't have done that!
The sound of the slap was louder on the video
Don't
than it had
touch
been in
me!
person.
Help!
It sounded like a whip cracking in the small
Officer,
room.
stop it!
Marcus let the video play until the moment his mother wiped the red from her lip. Then he hit a button on his own desk to freeze the frame. The image of Patricia, standing straight and tall, with her broken glasses on the floor, stayed fixed on the screen for everyone to see. Have you ever seen justice happen right in front of your eyes after years of waiting? It is a moment that changes the air in the room. "Officer Davis," Marcus said, pointing at the frozen screen. "Those words you spoke. You told this woman that she did not belong here because she had no money. You told her she belonged in the back of a police van. Do you deny saying those words?" Robert's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His face was covered in a thin sheet of sweat. The confidence he had carried for 20 years was gone. He looked down at his boots. He looked at the floor. "I was just doing my job," he muttered. "Your job is to protect the people of this city," Marcus said. "Not to hunt them. Not to use this courtroom as a trap to line your pockets and feed your ego." Marcus picked up a thick white document from his folder. "According to the state records I reviewed last week, you have personally collected $312,000 in fines from this specific zip code over the last 4 years. 80% of those fines were leveled against people over the age of 60 who had no legal representation. You thought they were weak because they were quiet. You thought they were invisible because they were poor." Marcus turned his gaze to Lawrence Brooks. "Officer Brooks!" "Step forward." Lawrence walked slowly to the center of the room. His head was down. "Yes, Your Honor," he said quietly. "You stood by that wall for 5 years," Marcus said. "You watched this man abuse his power. You saw him falsify reports. You saw him strike citizens. Why did you say nothing?" Lawrence felt a lump form in his throat. He looked at Patricia, who was now sitting quietly on the front bench, her hands still holding her brown purse. "I was afraid, Your Honor," Lawrence said, his voice breaking. "I needed the job. I have 3 kids. I told myself it wasn't my business. I told myself I couldn't stop it anyway." "Silence in the face of cruelty is not neutrality, Officer Brooks," Marcus said. "It is cooperation. When you wear that badge, every single person in this room is your business. Your silence didn't protect your family. It just made this room unsafe for everyone else's family." Lawrence nodded his head. A single tear rolled down his cheek. He did not try to wipe it away. He knew the judge was right. The weight he had been carrying on his chest for 5 years had just become too heavy to hold. Marcus looked back at Robert Davis. Robert Davis, by the authority granted to me by the state Supreme Court under Judicial Emergency Protocol, I am removing you from your position immediately. You are no longer an officer of this court. You are no longer a peace officer in the state of Georgia. Marcus looked over at Lawrence Brooks. Officer Brooks, you will take Mr. Davis's service weapon, his badge, and his keys right now. You will escort him to the processing room in the basement. He is being charged with official misconduct under color of law, aggravated assault on an elderly citizen, and civil rights violations under State Statute 16521. He will be held without bail until his formal arraignment on Thursday morning at 10 a.m. Robert took a step back. His eyes went wide. "You can't do this!" he shouted, his voice cracking with panic. "Judge Vance will stop this. You can't just walk in here and lock me up." "Judge Vance is currently at his residence," Marcus said coldly, "where 2 federal agents are presenting him with a search warrant for his personal bank accounts and his private tax records from the last 7 years. He will not be coming to save you, Mr. Davis. His bench is gone. Your protection is gone. The machine has stopped running." Lawrence Brooks did not hesitate this time. He stepped up to Robert. He reached out and unclipped the heavy black belt from Robert's waist. He took the gun. He took the silver badge. He took the iron keys. Robert did not fight back. He looked like an empty balloon that had lost all its air. He looked small. He looked like a man who finally realized that the walls he had built to trap others had finally closed in around him. Lawrence grabbed Robert by the arm, gently, without the cruelty Robert had used, and led him through the side door. The door clicked shut behind them. The courtroom remained completely quiet for 10 seconds. Then, a man in the back row began to clap. A woman next to him stood up and joined in. Within moments, all 42 people on the wooden benches were standing on their feet. The sound of their hands clapping filled the high-ceilinged room like thunder. They were not just clapping for the new judge. They were clapping for the end of a long, dark night. Marcus raised his hand to quiet the room. The clapping died down, but the energy in the air remained bright and clean. Marcus looked down at the clerk, Sandra Mitchell. "Clerk Mitchell," Marcus said, "you will clear every single case on today's docket. Every fine written by Robert Davis over the last 24 months is hereby dismissed under judicial review. The state will issue full refunds to every individual who paid a citation in this room during that time. You will begin processing those checks at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning." Sandra nodded rapidly. "Yes, Judge Williams, right away. I will start the paperwork immediately." Marcus stood up from the tall leather chair. He gathered his papers and closed his black folder. He walked down the 3 carpeted steps. He went over to the front bench where Patricia Moore was sitting. He reached down and took her by her stiff, wrinkled hand. He helped her stand up. "Come on, Ma," Marcus said softly, his voice full of warmth that no one else in the room had heard today. "Let's go get you some new glasses." Patricia looked up at her son. Her eyes were bright behind her tears. She looked at his sharp suit, and then she looked down at her own faded gray canvas shoes. She smiled, and her face looked just like it did back in that tiny kitchen in 1994. "Your grandmother was right, Marcus," she whispered. "The future is very bright." They walked down the center aisle together, side by side. Marcus did not walk fast. He walked at his mother's pace, matching her short, careful steps. The crowd parted for them like water, watching them pass with deep respect. They walked through the heavy double doors and out into the bright Atlanta sunshine. In the 6 months that followed that Monday morning, the city changed in ways that nobody could have predicted. The small municipal court building was officially closed down by the state. The files were moved to the Central City Courthouse, where every case was recorded on a public digital ledger that anyone could view at any time. The machine that had turned poor people's lives into cash was broken into pieces, never to be rebuilt. Judge Arthur Vance pled guilty to federal conspiracy and wire fraud 4 months after the raid. He lost his law license, his state pension, and his large brick house in the suburbs. He was sentenced to serve 6 years and 8 months in a federal facility in Alabama. His days are now spent sitting in a small, gray room with a single window that looks out onto a concrete wall. He has plenty of time to think about the people he allowed to be robbed in his courtroom. Robert Davis went to trial in the spring. The chief piece of evidence against him was the video from the courtroom wall, combined with 412 pages of financial records that Marcus had unearthed from the basement archives. The jury took less than 2 hours to find him guilty on all counts. The judge who handled his sentencing did not show him any mercy. Robert was given a sentence of 12 years in a maximum security state prison. Today, Robert wears a bright orange uniform. He spends his mornings sweeping the concrete floors of a long corridor at 6 a.m. He has no audience now. No one watches him work. No one laughs at his jokes. He is just another number in a system that does not care about his name. Lawrence Brooks did not go to jail. Marcus looked at his record and saw that Lawrence had never personally written a false ticket or struck a citizen. But Lawrence did not stay on the police force either. He resigned his position 2 weeks after the incident. He took a job working as a security director for a local children's hospital. He makes less money now, exactly $14,000 a year less than he did as a court officer. But he says his chest does not feel heavy anymore. Last month, Lawrence saw a supervisor treating a young janitor unfairly in the hospital hallway. Lawrence did not look away. He walked right over, stood between them, and made sure the young man was treated with respect. He is finally earning back the dignity he gave away during those 5 silent years. Sandra Mitchell stayed on as a clerk, but she was placed under strict probation for 1 year. Every week, she has to submit her digital logs directly to Marcus's office for a manual review. She has become the most precise clerk in the entire city. She double-checks every single fine to make sure it matches the exact letter of the law. She learned the hard way that helping a villain is a fast way to lose your own life. The $50 a week that Patricia Moore saved inside that small green tin box grew into something much bigger than a law degree. 5 months ago, Marcus used his personal savings to establish the Martha Moore Judicial Scholarship Fund at Georgia State University. The fund provides exactly $25,000 a year to young students from poor neighborhoods who want to go to law school but cannot afford the books or the tuition. The only requirement for the scholarship is that the student must promise to spend their first 5 years after graduation working for public defense or judicial oversight. The door that Patricia broke her back to open for her son is now standing wide open for dozens of other children who thought they were invisible. Patricia does not work at the laundromat anymore. She spends her afternoons sitting on the front porch of a small, comfortable house that Marcus bought for her in a quiet neighborhood near Grant Park. She has a new pair of shoes now. They are deep blue leather with solid soles that do not crack when she walks. She wears a pair of elegant glasses with gold frames that let her see the green leaves on the trees perfectly. But she still keeps that old green tin box on her dresser. Inside it, she keeps the 3 broken pieces of her old glasses. She looks at them every morning before she starts her day. They are her reminder of where they started and what it costs to get to where they are now. Have you ever had to stand strong in a moment when everything felt like it was turning against you? Drop a comment below and tell me how you found the strength to keep going. This story needs to be shared with anyone who feels like they are fighting an uphill battle against a system that does not see them. Share it with a mother who is working 2 jobs right now to give her children a chance. Share it with a young person who thinks their small choices do not matter. Let them know that truth has a way of finding its way into the highest seats in the land, no matter how long it takes. The strength of a person is never measured by the money in their purse or the condition of their shoes, but by the quiet truth they carry in their heart when the world tells them to bow down. This has been Crown Stories.